We are recording. Bradley Wharton, how are you, mate?
I'm very well, thank you, sir. I'm very well indeed. I've been looking forward to this chat for a long time.
Good, good.
The
Well,
old long time listener, first time caller sort of
well, this
situation.
this is what's lovely because we've met in a very different world. I have an MMA podcast, and I met you through your commentary work that you do for Cage Warriors, and then you come and guested on the MMA fan podcast with Blake and I. And then out of the blue, you post a comment that you listened to this. So it was like, oh, this is a surprise and a lovely surprise. Um, so before we jump into that, I don't know why, because you work within, a commentator in for a mixed martial arts organisation. Why that would mean you don't like music? I don't know why I presumed that. Tell me about a little bit about your relationship with music and how important it's been in your life, mate.
I I, I love music. I'm one of those really cliche people when you say like, "Oh, what kind of music you like?" And I say, "Oh, I like a bit of everything." Do you know what I mean? I'm a bit of a fence sitter in that respect. It's just something that's I always remember being part of life from being a very, very young age. My dad had a really cool like stack stereo system back in the day when I was a
Yeah,
kid, and that meant that I got his old one in my bedroom. So I had one of those ones with like the wooden panels
yeah,
and the so like in a wooden box essentially. Then you got the
yeah,
tape decks, the equalizer, the radio, and
yeah,
then the LP deck on top. And then underneath it was a little glass cabinet with records in.
yeah.
So whatever my dad would listen to downstairs that I liked, I'd kind of sneak up into my bedroom and
Yeah,
hide it amidst all the old crap records that he didn't want to
yeah.
listen to anymore. I think I had Frank Sidebottom's Timpley LP in there at one point,
Oh, mate,
and
do you know what? First person in 481 episodes to mention Frank Sidebottom. Shout out Frank Sidebottom. The greatest music documentary ever made was the recent Frank Sidebottom documentary.
yeah, superb, wasn't it?
Incredible! What an absolute genius and tortured genius Chris Seavey was. Yeah, glad that we finally got a mention of Frank Sidebottom on this podcast. Anyway, I digress. Go on, carry on. Sorry, you was
Yeah, so I
nicking
just had
records.
stuff like that. Like just it was like my sort of my dad's cast offs. So I had the Young Ones record as well, Hole in My
Yeah,
Shoe. And I don't even know if I liked it or not, but it was just the fact that they were like my kind of first two LPs. And then like I say, I just started nicking stuff that he was
yeah,
playing downstairs. And so I had like I think Paranoid by Black Sabbath was one that I
yeah,
got into at a really young age. We had a I had music homework when I was really young, and you had to pick 10 songs and write, is it a happy song or a sad song? Is it a fast song or a slow song? You know,
yeah.
that kind of age, not anything particularly musical, just like
Sure.
very, very basic stuff. And I was going to do like whatever was on top of the pops. And my dad was like, no, I'll do this Black Sabbath album. So I got 10 out of 10 and great taste in music written on my homework. So was
Fantastic.
well in there with the music teachers early on. But yeah, it's just I just have a lot of happy memories based around music. My parents had a little off license when I was a kid, and I used to go to like the cash and carriage with my dad, constantly there and back in the van, a couple of hours drive, and there was always music on in the van. So just loads of nice memories of being sat with the old man and
Yeah.
listening to Pink Floyd and whatever prog rock he was into at the time.
It's
And it's just kind of never left me. Like, I worked as a journalist for many years, so I've sat at home a lot writing. And, if you've got the TV on, it's a distraction. So it's always been records for me
yeah.
in the background. And then, of course, the job that I do now, a big part of that's the presentation. And,
Mm,
you have fighters who walk out to iconic theme tunes. And
mm.
that's something I always enjoy listening to. Um, we've started with Cage Warriors doing Spotify playlists of all the walkout songs because you constantly get people sort of, tweeting in on social media like, oh, what was such and such a body's walkout song? So we do playlists now. So if you've been to an event and you heard a good song that you like, you can go back and go down the playlist and find it. So yeah, I try and involve it whenever I can. Like if you read anything that I write on cagewarriors.com, there's inevitably little cheeky music references that I hope at least one person out there will get, but otherwise they're just for my own amusement.
Well, it was going to be something I wanted to sort of talk about was was Fighters walkout music, and it ties in perfectly because obviously it is as they're being introduced into the arena as they make their walk to the octagon. Um, and so with that in mind, we'll pull back onto that in a sec. But I'm going to ask you for track one, which is the song that you regard as having the greatest ever intro, please, Brad.
I mean, should probably put a disclaimer out first because this is a Kiss song. And look, some people like steak tartare, but every now and again you want a Big Mac, right? And for me, that's Kiss in a nutshell. You know, they're not writing a song like Stairway to Heaven, but
Yeah,
they'll do a big, loud, stupid, feel good rock song.
yeah.
And Detroit Rock City for me is the absolutely epitome of a great Kiss song. Um, my first Kiss record that I bought was a really bad one. It was called Unmasked, and it was kind of when they were in a bit of a flux, like they'd had some of the early band members leave, and the musical direction was a bit messed up. And I
Is this
bought
when
this
they kind of
album.
quit the makeup as well?
So this was just before they quit the makeup. So Peter Criss had left. Ace Frehley pretty much didn't do anything on the record, and they were the talented musicians of the group, really.
Mm,
So this album, Unmasked, it was very over polished and poppy. Like they'd had the big hit with "I Was Made for Loving You," which is
mm,
essentially sort of a disco song, really. And Unmasked, they kind of went that over polished, over produced poppy style, and it just didn't go down well at all.
mm.
And I remember I picked the album based on the cover. I'd never heard a Kiss song before outside I Was Made for Loving You. And I just got taken by the look and I thought, oh man, these guys look pretty cool. And bought the album Unmasked. The cover of it was a comic book, which again, like was really into comic books. So I thought it looked cool. Not a great album. But the inlay actually had like a little biography thing that sort of said, "Oh, you know, this is generally regarded as one of the musical low points." So I thought, well, there must be some good stuff out there. And I convinced my mom to take me back to the record shop and buy me another Kiss record. And she goes, "Right, get the greatest hits album and then work back from there." So
Yeah.
I got, I mean, they knock a greatest hits album out every few years, to be honest, Kiss.
Mm.
But I got Greatest Kiss, and the first track on it was Detroit Rock City, and I just got it straight away. The way it starts off, you get the sort of danga 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 dang with the guitars, and then
Yeah,
the
yeah,
great drum fill, and it reminds me of like a car engine starting over and then
yeah,
kicking in. And that song for me is just it's been the start of so many great nights out. Like if I'm getting ready to go out, I'll put that on and I'm like, yeah, I'm in the mood. Or even just doing housework. You know, if you want to put the Hoover around and you need a
yeah.
bit of energy, like stick Detroit Rock City on. And if you're not bopping around with your Hoover after 2 minutes, you need to check your pulse, man. I think it's just big, cheesy, stupid fun, and I love it.
Wonderful. Well, look, it's impossible not to ask you this. If you was to find yourself walking into that cage, what would your walkout music be?
Man,
You
I don't know.
must have thought about this, Brad. Come on.
That's tough. I'm probably the least dangerous guy in the whole of the mixed martial arts industry, so I've never really thought too much into it. It probably would be something like actually, like maybe God of Thunder or
Oh,
something
good
like that,
shout.
or War Machine.
Mm,
That's a good that'd be a good walkout tune, nice and sort of brooding and heavy, like something with
yeah,
the big drums. Yeah, probably something like that.
absolutely, absolutely. What's been your favourite walkout from any organisation? You know, it can be Cage Warriors, or you know, or UFC or whatever. Um, has there been any that has just struck you and like literally shoot you to the bones?
There's been a few over different eras. I mean, if you go kind of like way back, I think the first guy to really have sort of an iconic walkout was Tito Ortiz.
Mm,
And it was a very different time. It was when MMA was very much bad tribal tattoos and mohawks. And of course, he had the shorts with the flames on and the beanie with the flames on, which I'm sure was very cool back in 2001.
yeah,
You know, doesn't necessarily hold up today, but he would come out to Limp Bizkit,
yeah,
and it was just so of its time.
yeah,
And at the time as well, the UFC had sort of just been taken over by new owners, and they were really trying to make it something cool. And they had the walkouts. They had like almost pro wrestling style walkouts with big screens and
yeah,
flames going off and fireworks. And Tito Ortiz walking out to break stuff. It was just perfect
yeah,
for what it was at the time. But like I think kind of moving on from that, like Anderson Silva coming out to Ain't No Sunshine, and it's not a fight song at
yeah,
all. You know, it's not something that you would think about. you know, it was getting you in the mood, getting the adrenaline going, but it just personified like how calm he was
Yeah,
and how confident he was in his skills that he would just stroll out to that.
yeah,
Yeah, you know, hearing it live in an arena, it genuinely does send shivers through your bones.
yeah,
And I guess another one would be there's a guy called Yoshihiro Akiyama who would come out to Time to Say Goodbye.
yeah,
And again, not a fight song, but they would sort of bathe the arena in white light and fantastic visual effects,
yeah,
and just hearing him like come out to this really just chilled song. It was
yeah.
just a wild way to set up an atmosphere for a fight.
Perfect. Did you catch? I mean, from the Cage Warriors days through to where he's at now as a global superstar. Paddy the Baddy's walkouts are always good to Basement Jacks and Heads Will Roll. That little hybrid mashup of that always seems to get the crowd going. But did you see? What's his? It's Peter Queally, isn't it? The in Bellator, when he
Yeah,
comes out to Zombie. Did you see
yeah,
that? Fucking hell, that was goosebumps. That was.
yeah.
Uh,
There was one fight in particular. I can't remember exactly who it was, but Queally walked out first, and the crowd carried on singing "Zombie" while his opponent was walking out, and you couldn't hear his opponent's
yeah,
theme tune.
yeah,
Yeah, Pete's a cool guy, and
yeah,
you know he's a guy who fights with his heart on his sleeve, wins some, loses some, but those entrances are absolutely epic.
yeah,
Just phenomenal in Dublin as well.
yeah,
You know, reminds me of like when McGregor used to come out to Foggy Dew
yeah,
in Cage Warriors, and then that first ever UFC Dublin, and
yeah,
he came out to a mashup of Foggy Dew and the Notorious by Notorious
yeah.
B.I.G. And yeah, just once in a lifetime moments.
Wonderful. Well, let's take you back. First song you remember hearing, please, Brad, that you had an emotional response to.
Um, I really struggled with this one actually because there's kind of a few over the years. I do remember getting very into "Everything I Do It For You" by Bryan Adams, which is
You couldn't
obviously
not. It was in your ear holes for 16 weeks at number one,
yeah,
mate.
exactly. I remember pestering my nan until she bought me the cassette single of it. But I don't know if I actually ever, you know, it wasn't particularly emotional. I think I just liked it as a
Sure.
kid. But the one I've gone for is a song called "Keep Talking" by Pink Floyd, from the Division Bell album, and there's a couple of reasons. I think firstly, it was my first Pink Floyd album. There was another that came out when I was a bit younger, but I was obviously too young to be listening to stuff then. But this is the first album that I remember coming out and sort of being excited about it before it came out. My
Yeah.
dad was a huge Pink Floyd fan, and that really rubbed off on me. And I just remember him being really pumped about this new Pink Floyd album. And it's not the best Pink Floyd album. It's not my favorite Pink Floyd album, but it was kind of the first one that came out that I was sort of able to listen to from start to finish as a new Pink Floyd album, and
Yeah.
just loved every single track on it. The reason that I chose this track in particular is that it opens up with a really poignant speech by Stephen Hawking, and he says something along the lines of, I'm going to try and get this right. For millions of years, mankind lived just like the animals. Then something happened that unlocked the power of our imagination. We learned to talk. And I just found that really like, wow, that's a really kind of like sort of deep and meaningful thing.
Yeah.
Um, and language has always been a huge part of my life, either as a writer or a commentator. So even as a young kid, well, I was probably only about 10 when that album came out, it just kind of really stuck with me. But the main reason it stuck with me was that my my late uncle at the time had motor neuron disease, and he had a voice box
Okay.
and sounded exactly like Stephen Hawking.
Sure.
And at the time, as a kid, it was like it was a bit embarrassing, and you know, I think you know, sort of attitudes around disability have changed massively, you know, since I was 10 years old. And, you know, it was always a bit like, oh, I don't really want to kind of talk about this. And it was a bit embarrassing sort of thing. So to hear that on a record, which I thought was absolutely fantastic, was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then he used to let us play with the box when we were around there. So I used to type the Stephen Hawking quote in and make him say it. It was fantastic.
um, that's quite heavy music for. I mean, Division Bell come out what 90, maybe 91,
94,
95. Oh
94.
right. Oh, okay. How old would you have been then?
I was 10. So I would have been 9 or 10.
that's intense music for a 9, or a 10-year-old to be listening to Pink Floyd. But you'd already been kind of sort of, you'd been exposed to Pink Floyd quite a lot in, I presume, in the dad's car, and right. And so, what you felt this was like the first time that you sort of owned a bit of Pink Floyd in your own right, rather than it
Yeah,
sort of be,
absolutely. Like sort of like my dad's favorite Pink Floyd album is "Wish You Were Here," and
mhm,
obviously "Dark Side of the Moon" and "The Wall." He went to see The Wall live, which I'm incredibly jealous of.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, this was the first sort of new one, and like I say I just remember him banging on about, oh, this album's coming out, and it was kind of a really big thing when it actually dropped, and like
yeah,
he went and got the tape on the first day. um and I listened to it so much in the van, and I got a copy of it as soon as I could. So I had a little double tape deck um on my stereo system. So I made a copy of it, and it was just in my Walkman constantly. Like the
yeah,
amount of pocket money I must have got through on batteries just listening to that until it started slowing down
yeah,
was absolutely insane. But yeah, like I say, it's just it was my first Pink Floyd album,
yeah,
and looking back today, there's obviously um there's a lot, a lot of much better Pink Floyd music, and
sure,
what I didn't get at the time was kind of all the sort of the bitterness in the lyrics towards Roger Waters.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But obviously, it was quite funny to kind of pick that up, going back to the album
yeah,
at a later age. It's kind of like it's kind of like Oasis, really. You go through stages of thinking that Liam Gallagher was the cool one, and then Noel was the
yeah,
cool one, and now Liam's the cool one again. And I
yeah,
kind of went through that a bit with Roger Waters and Dave Gilmour, but
yeah,
it is what it is. I appreciate what they both did, and I mean, The Wall and Dark Side of the Moon are just absolutely classic pieces of music. I
yeah,
mean, I probably listen to Dark Side of the Moon once a week, start to
yeah,
finish.
yeah. He is a masterpiece. Tell me the exact emotion that you got when you heard that for the first time.
I think it was I don't know, maybe almost a bit of pride, really. Just like hearing something like that and just being able to relate it to my uncle. And
Yeah,
it was like, wow, this is actually really cool. It's not something I need to be embarrassed about or keep quiet. And then I remember, like, sort of playing the tune to people at school, and when you'd have like a non-uniform day and you could take stuff in, and someone would take a little boombox in, and I'd
yeah,
put this song on and be like, oh, my uncle's got one of these. So
yeah.
yeah, I guess the emotion was more pride than anything else.
Oh, that's wonderful. Where was growing up? Where was home?
So home was originally Manchester, from Greater Manchester. Lived there till I was 13. And when I was 13, my dad got a job in Holland, and he worked out there for about 6 months on a contract. And at the end of it, they extended it. And then they were going to extend it again for another year or 2 years or something. And my mum was just like, didn't want the family to be split up. And obviously, me sort of entering the terrible teens, and my brother 4 years behind me, she didn't want that sort of a situation where my dad was like flying home every other weekend and not there
Yeah,
during the week. So they just very quickly made the decision, I think over the space of about 2 weeks, to sort of up sticks and take us all out there. My dad worked for Shell at the time, and there was a huge Shell facility over there, and also it wasn't too far away from the Hague, so you've got all the European courts and the embassies and stuff. So there was a British school and an American school just outside the Hague. So we went to the British school. So it was quite good in the fact that we still got like all the British curriculum. Um, but then, being able to go to school in a different country and experience that, and with it being like an international school as well, there was kids from like 60 odd different countries.
yeah,
So like for me, going from like a pretty crap, rough school in a shitty part of Manchester, it was daunting because it was like, okay, now you're going to school with all these rich kids and ambassadors kids and stuff, and I'm like, how am I going to deal with this? I'm just not going
yeah,
to fit in at all. But then getting there and realizing that kids just don't really care about stuff like that. Like, you
yeah,
bond over music, you bond over video games, you bond over
yeah,
sports, and it was it it went from being like sort of real trepidation to just being like, well, you know what? Actually, I can walk into any room anywhere on the planet and have a conversation with someone and never feel like I'm any better or worse or anything else. So it was a big eye opener in that regard. Like the trepidation disappeared pretty quickly, and like I say, the experience of like getting to go to a different country and experience a different culture quite early on um, really set me up. I think still anymore. I'm about all over the place, so I think that's probably come from there, I guess.
Yeah. So just one of the skills that you said that I guess you took from that was the fact that to this day you feel comfortable walking into a room and having a conversation with people. That that might just sound like a sort of gentle little sentence, but that would also be terrifying for a huge amount of people. And I'm confident now having this conversation now, but I couldn't walk into a room of strangers and feel comfortable and confident enough to just throw myself in the mix. Um, did you always have that kind of confidence, or do you think that come from moving schools at such an important age as well, 13, when you've almost found your group of friends, you're starting to really form who you are, and then up sticks and you move to another country, let alone another school. Do you think that gave you an inner confidence?
Yeah, I think so. Like I'd always been quite chatty and quite talkative as a kid, and I always made friends quite easily, and had lots of different groups of friends, friends in school and friends from stuff out of school. Um, but yeah, certainly moving over there like really helped with that because like I guess like my sort of main group of friends were like the sporty kids because I was like doing a bit of sport back then. But then like musically, I was getting into like rock and metal and stuff like that. So I used to wear a long black leather trench coat and hang out with all like the goth kids.
Yeah,
But then I was also into video games and stuff. So I used to hang out with the nerdy kids. And
yeah,
I just, yeah, I've never, it really helped sort of like knock down any barriers that I had because when I got there, I was very much like, I don't want to talk to anyone. These people are better than me. These people are, going to know things that I don't. Like they're going to be smarter than me. And then you just realize like
did you
it's
pull
just,
that?
it's all in your head.
Did that come from going out there knowing that you'd come from a working class background in Manchester?
Yeah, absolutely. There was a really odd experience, and I think it made me quite cynical of life actually when I very first moved over there. Just before I'd left, we had a like a recruitment day at my primary school in Manchester. I don't know if recruitment day is the right word, but basically the armed forces sent a lot of people. So there was Army, Navy, and Royal Marines, I think. And they showed us all these videos, and it was basically like videos of like tanks shooting things and people firing machine guns and trying to recruit people into the cadets to join like the Royal Marines and infantry and stuff. And then about 2 weeks after I started at the school in Holland, which is obviously a private school, they said, "Oh, we've got the armed forces coming in to do this, what's it day?" And I was like, "Oh, I've already seen this." And then it was completely different. It was all about like officer training and I was just like, "You pieces of shit! Like
Yeah,
this is genuinely awful."
yeah,
But yeah, that really kind of that really made me think, and it really like it gave me I think probably a healthy sense of cynicism.
yeah,
Um, but like I say, like my experiences with the actual people, the actual kids there, were absolutely fantastic, and I think it helped that there were a lot of kids from working class backgrounds there too. Like a lot of the teachers' kids, like so if you were a teacher over there, your kids got to go to the school. So there was enough kids who'd had similar backgrounds to me that I could kind of crack on with.
hmm
But then, like you say, as a kid, there's a lot of equalizers. Like we all play the same sport, we all play the same video games, we all listen to the same music and get up to the same mischief. Whether your parents are super rich or whether they're not, or whether you come from a working class background, or whether you're the Nigerian ambassador's daughter who used to give us lifts around she used to give us lifts home in a limousine,
I
which
wasn't
was
all
pretty
bad then.
sick. No, no. I mean, I only lived about a 2 minute walk from school, but it's not an offer you turn down, really, is it? Do you want to hop in the back of my limo for a lift home? Yeah, sure, why not?
Tell me the song that soundtrack your time at school, please, Brad.
I think I think every kid at some point or other needs to have a record that is going to deeply annoy or upset their parents. And for me, that was Mechanical Animals by Marilyn Manson. And I guess like the big song off that was Rock Is Dead. Like I said, I got kind of really into Kiss. I love the visual element of Kiss and the theatrics and the stage show. And I guess Marilyn Manson was just sort of that push to the extreme. Obviously he had a wild image and a wild stage show. And I remember a couple of kids sort of having some Marilyn Manson stuff at school, and I remember being sat with my parents, and I think it was like an MTV Awards show that he played Rock Is Dead at, and he had a cross made out of TV screens that was on fire, and it was all very, very extreme, very over the top, very, I mean, literally just parent bait. Basically, it was
Yeah.
just meant to annoy people's parents and for kids to buy it to annoy their parents with. And I just remember my mum and dad sort of looking at me watching it and thinking, "Oh God, he's not going to start listening to this, is he?"
Where have we gone
And
wrong?
my mum says, "Oh, what do you think of that?" Then I was like, "Yeah, it's really good. It's really good." And about a week or so later, I said to my dad, "I'm going to go and get the new Marilyn Manson album." And he goes, "No, you're not." I don't know how old I was at the time, maybe 14 or so. And he goes, "Listen," he goes, "I don't mind you listening to it." He goes, "But you play your music too loud. Your little brother doesn't need to hear all that nonsense, and your mum doesn't need to hear all that nonsense." And it was really weird for me because I was like, "Well, you let me listen to Hand of Doom when I was about 8.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like song about a guy taking heroin, but we can't have Marilyn Manson." So I was a bit annoyed about that. So I went and bought it anyway, and thought I'd done a really good job of hiding it in the CD rack in my bedroom. But he found it, and I got to bollock him. But about 3 weeks, I think he was more annoyed that I bought it and he'd said no than me
Yeah.
actually buying it. And then about 2 or 3 weeks later, I uh I went into my bedroom and it was there stuck in the top of the CD rack. So he put it back in. So I think
Oh,
that was sort of a silent truce. But I just remember it being like sort of my first like rebellious record purchase, I
yeah.
suppose, and it was a bit naughty and a bit out there, and I just loved like the whole like the concept of it. So like it came in like a blue plastic CD case, and you could take the inlay card out and turn the pages around, and if you inserted them back in, it showed up little bits of text and stuff that you
Yeah.
couldn't see through the naked eye. I just thought that was really really cool, and just the whole like it was a concept album about an androgynous alien that had
Mm.
come down and become a rock star, which my mum embarrassed me with later on by saying, "Yeah, David Bowie did that about 35 years ago.
Yeah.
And you've got that somewhere in your record collection as well." So I was like, "No, yeah, never mind." But yeah,
Uh,
I don't know. It's a weird one now because obviously one of those situations whereby he's been accused of some
yeah.
not very nice things in
Mm.
recent years. To my knowledge, I don't think he's been in court over any of
I
it.
don't think so. No.
But obviously, it's not a pleasant thing to hear. And then, but it's weird because it's like it's still your memories growing up
Yeah.
listening to that kind of stuff. There's plenty of people that have done horrible things that have produced great art, and I don't think there's a right answer to that debate. Should you separate the art from the artist? I think it comes down to personal choices, and you've got to take
Completely.
every case on his merits.
Completely. I couldn't agree more. And I think as somebody that was much older than 14, but was DJing in an alternative club and seeing the impact, like way back when Sweet Dreams, the first sort of breakthrough track, I think maybe, and then that was getting traction because it was obviously an iconic cover. But then they drop Beautiful People when it's like, holy shit. And you see the video to Beautiful People when it's like, wow, this is fantastic. And being someone that grew up listening to like Nine Inch Nails and Bowie, you could see like, oh, he's got a bit of that and he's got a bit of that. But woo, just look at him. He looks incredible. And I think it's about 1996. At the time I was in a band and we got took into this record company office and they were sniffing around us. It was, oh, we're going to get signed. Are we going to get a record deal? And we just was six lads with long hair that made rock music. And I just remember the guy just going, "Yeah, look, I like all the songs and stuff." And but to be honest, it's like if you're into rock and you're young, you're going to want this. And he just held up Kerrang, and it had a picture of Marilyn Manson on the cover. and I just thought, he's right. And it's like, if you're young, you want, if I was lucky that I caught when I was sort of 14, the Beastie Boys come out. So it was like the most shocking thing ever. And it was like, this is amazing. This is going to piss my parents off. And it was my punk. And every generation gets that. I worry in this generation where, people have got Ed Sheeran and Adele. It's like, there's got to be something out there that I'm sure there is. I'm sure there is. I'm just far too old to know. But
I remember coming home with I think it must have been Kerrang, and it was Queens of the Stone Age were on the cover,
yeah,
and it was Josh Homme and Nick Oliveri on a train track just covered in fake blood.
yeah.
And I just remember my mum saying, "What is this that you're reading now?" I was like, "Oh, it's a great band that I've just started listening to, Mum. You've got this to look forward to."
Nick Oliveira didn't even need the blood. He looked insane, whatever. Anything he ever done, it was just like, that guy, he's walking very close to the edge. Right, okay. Well, let's move on to track 4. Tell me about the first album or the first record you remember buying from a record store, please, Brad.
So yeah, this was an interesting one. I had to really think about this because I remember getting my first pay packet from a paper round that I did, and going straight to a record shop and buying just the three oddest combination of records you could
Yeah.
think of. I bought Nevermind. I bought a 2 CD Jungle compilation,
Mm-hmm.
which I think I only kept because it had Shy FX Original Nutter as the
Oh,
first track, and
okay.
everything else was rubbish. And I bought Enter the Wu Tang 36 Chambers,
I'm not
and I
being
was
funny,
like,
Brad. There's 3 bangers right there.
I know, but it's just a wild combination to get them all together. But I was like, was that the first one that I bought like with my own cash? And then I remembered my my dad's parents moved to the Isle of Man, and we used to go. We used to have to fly from Holland into Manchester, and then we'd drive and get a ferry. And the ferry had a little gift shop with music and hat and sweets and whatever else. And I bought Fat of the Land by the Prodigy. I must have had some pocket money, and it it was a weird one because I remember Firestarter coming out, and absolutely sacrilege to say something like this now, but I just didn't rate it at all when I first heard it. I don't think I'd really heard much Prodigy before then. I was like, yeah, it's all right, and I think it might have like knocked something that I did like out of the top 10 on top of the
Yeah.
pops or something. So maybe I sort of harbored a little bit of animosity towards it. But then Breathe came out, and absolutely loved that. My dad absolutely loved it. And I don't know if it was around his birthday or Father's Day or something. I tried to buy it for him in Asda, and then they wouldn't sell it to me because it had the parental advisory sticker on it. So I had to go and get the old man to convince them to let me buy this single for him. And I remember putting it on in the car, and it had a very explicit live version of Their Law and
Yeah.
Poison as the B-side to the single. And it just blew me away. And I was like, I
Mm.
need to hear more of these people. So when I saw Fat of the Land on this ferry to the Isle of Man, it was yeah, it was an instant purchase. A great way to spend 7.99 or whatever an album cost back then.
Absolutely.
But I mean, I listened to that album. I've not listened to it for a while actually, and I was thinking to myself the other day, as soon as we finish this, I'm putting that on.
Yeah.
That's gonna be my Monday afternoon. But I guarantee, like, even having not listened to it for a while, I know every lyric to Diesel Power. I could
Oh,
sing
I
the
was
whole thing.
literally about to say I played Diesel Power on Friday and like at my club, and it still sounds phenomenal.
It's great, isn't it? So you've got that kind of like industrial dance music. Diesel Power's like a bit of a rap song. You've got Fuel My Fire, which is kind of like a punky
Mm.
guitar driven. There's just nothing bad on it,
Yeah.
and that everyone, even with your favorite albums, there's one that you might skip. But for me, this is like a no skip album. Like
Yeah.
I could listen to it start to finish, never get bored of it. And I mean, when you're stuck in the Isle of Man for a week, you need something like this to get you through. So
Yeah. Oh, mate, we're Essex finest, mate. We're very proud of them down here. Um, and yeah, I mean, amazing to see that there's going to be more Prodigy stuff happening. I think it was only last week was the anniversary of Keith's passing, which was obviously like terrible, terrible when that happened. And we talk about Marilyn Manson being an iconic front person for a band. is there anyone more iconic in the '90s than that kind of vision of Keith with the two green little mini mohawks and just losing his shit on stage, and it was just phenomenal. Did you ever catch the Prodigy live?
I didn't, and honestly, one of my biggest regrets, because I had a few opportunities to go and see them over the years, and just through various things, never got round to it. Like the past sort of 15 years for me, like a lot of my weekends were at fight shows.
Yeah,
And when I get a weekend off, like you kind of just want to sit and chill. And
yeah, yeah,
I passed up the chance to go to quite a few gigs over the year, but there's nothing that upsets me more than not going to see Prodigy live. I'm going to try and get to one of the shows that they're doing now, but
yeah.
obviously I'm sure it'll be absolutely fantastic. But would have loved to have seen Keith. Like I was never bold enough to actually shave the middle out, but I did have
Yeah.
a spiky double mohawk that I dyed
Love
different
it.
colors at one point. Yeah, what a guy! And got to say as well, Firestarter did grow on me, obviously, because it's absolutely fantastic. Don't know
You
what I
meant
was thinking back then.
well, you mentioned Poison and their law, and I was so lucky that I got to see them at V97 the year this album dropped, and it felt like for us it was their homecoming. They've made it, and they're playing in their back garden in Essex. And when they played Poison, to this day, I've never been at a gig where I've experienced anything like what I experienced when they played Poison. I've never seen a field bounce in unison the way it did. And that Fat of the Land was that, and it's an incredible record. But there's something about Poison. That's the bridging song for me. When like all the stuff on Jilted is still really kind of ravey in places like Voodoo People and No Good Start Dance, all amazing songs. But I think Poison is where you've got that hip hop drum beat, which I think for me just seemed to just unlock something for Liam to really just experiment more with his love of hip hop. And you hear that on Diesel Power more than anything, really. And just them huge hip hop break beats, but with just like fucking huge guitars and just bleeps and tweaks. It's like, and it, and the things of electronic music I find is it dates so quickly because it's all based around technology that it's constantly evolving. Yeah, I think there's records, and I think Fat of the Land is one of those that. I mean, that's what 20, nearly 25 years old. There's something about that, isn't it? Um, could come out today, and everybody would still be like, "What is this?" It's
100%.
sits somewhere like out of time, and it's a magical record. It really is. Right, let's go clubbing. Tell me the song that soundtrack your year's clubbing, please, Brad.
Yeah, I've had a few different phases when I was clubbing a lot. Growing up in Holland, like there's a big bar culture over there, so I was more of like into going to bars. Like the legal drinking age over there is 16, so like, we were going to pubs and that when we were about 15, and getting into nightclubs was a bit harder, as you have a national ID card in Holland as well that you have to have, and that's pretty much the only ID that they accept in clubs. What they did though was that it was like a sort of a laminated card, like with a sort of plasticky cover on it, but then they printed your details on top. So if you were born in 1984, you could scratch the 4 with a pin and make it into a 1. So managed
You
to
can
get
take the
into
boy out of Manchester, can't
I
you?
know, right? Where there's a will, there's a way. Yeah, so like and obviously the club scene over there was very like very trancy, very housey. Problem for me was my parents were going through a bit of a club renaissance at that time as well, and I bumped into them once in a nightclub, and then never wanted to go to a nightclub again for the rest of my life because bumping into your mum and dad when all your mates are there is just just not cool. So I kind of stuck to the bars, but when I would come back to Holland to see all my when I come back from Holland, like in the summer holidays and the school holidays to see all my Manchester mates, they were really into like the whole indie scene, and there just wasn't any of that in Holland. Like they never really got past like Oasis and stuff, and
Yeah.
there wasn't really anywhere you could go and listen to Stone Roses and the Happy Mondays. So I've just not really heard much of that stuff. And then I went to a place called Fifth Avenue in Manchester, which I think it's unfortunately gone now, but even before it went, it just became like a standard student club. But back in the day, it was like a proper indie type place, and you could get a Red Bull and vodka for £1. A beer was 50p. So what you do, you just get a pint glass with 3 Red Bull and vodkas in, £3, get on the dance floor. And I just remember being on the dance floor and Hallelujah by Happy Mondays coming on the club mix. And I was just away with the fairies. I was like, oh, this is absolutely fantastic. Because it's like it's a nice beat, but obviously like being used to like sort of trance and house and stuff being a bit faster, it was nice to just have a little
Yeah,
bob around dance and like just a really everyone in a really sort of friendly atmosphere. And to be honest, like I don't even think anyone was like doing any pills or anything because
yeah,
it was genuinely a young person's student
yeah,
a studenty club. It wasn't really like a hardcore sort of clubbing or raving type place. So with that in mind, the fact that the atmosphere was just so fantastic and everyone's hugging each other, putting their arms around each other. And yeah, every single time I went back in the school holidays or the summer holidays, I'd always round the guys up and be like, "You've got to take me to Fifth Ave." And of
yeah,
course, they went every weekend, so it was nothing special for them. But
yeah,
for me, it was like, "Let's go!" Like I absolutely loved it. And again, it's one of those songs that I still listen to this day, and it's just got a lot of very very happy memories of being able to go back and see all my old mates that I kept in touch with.
yeah. It's such a banger, and I think it's up there with intros for me as well. Just that scream from Rowetta at the beginning, and then just like the sort of is it Gregorian chanting or whatever they call it, and then obviously it's Weatherall, isn't it, that does the club mix, and it's phenomenal. And I think there's never ever been a documentary about Mancunian music that hasn't used that in the opening credits because it just encapsulates as a lifelong Stone Roses fan, and I'm smothered in Smith's tattoos. There's something about Hallelujah by the Mondays that encapsulates that time like really perfectly. That and Voodoo Ray, I think, like they're the two that just absolutely capture what people outside of Manchester, in 1989,
Yeah.
what they wanted. Nothing I wanted more than was to go to the Hacienda, and see this magical club that we'd heard about. And it's been really interesting speaking to musicians that DJ'd there or played there and come through it, and it is interesting that they all sort of say there was a point there where it was magical, and like anything, when it becomes a thing, it then that generally can then come with a lot of problems because there's money available there and there's huge amounts of people there, and obviously it's well documented that it become quite a problematic place, but the music that come out of there, oh, phenomenal. None more so than Hallelujah.
It was cool for me as well to like sort of go and hear all that kind of Manchester music and indie music, and then take that back to Holland because like, I guess I would have been in the sixth form at the time,
Yeah,
so we had a big stereo in the common room, and sort of me and my mates were like in charge of the stereo basically. So I'd go in and then like put all this cool music on that I'd heard that hadn't come out in Holland or people just didn't know it.
yeah,
So it definitely earned me a few cool points in the common room, which as we
yeah.
know is the world's greatest currency when you're a kid.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. Well, with that in mind, let's go back to Manchester. Or are we going to go back to Manchester? I don't know. Tell me the favourite song from an artist from your home county. Where's home?
So home is Droylsden in Manchester. That's where I was born
Hmm.
and where I spent like sort of the first 13 years. But I think Manchester's a bit of a cheat code for this question because there's just so many, you know, great songs and great bands that everyone's going to know. And personally as well, I generally feel more at home these days when I go to Holland. Like I try and go back as much as I can.
Yeah,
Because I just think, when you're a kid, you're a kid, and you do very limited things that are the same that most kids do. And I did most of my growing up in Holland. Like I was there for 9.5 years, I think, in total.
and they're key years,
And
right? Going at 13, they're
yeah,
key years, aren't they?
13 to early 20s. And that's when you develop like your taste in music and your taste in a lot of things. Um, so I picked someone from The Hague, and it's a woman called Anouk and a song called Nobody's Wife. Um, she had a really cool story. So she was sort of a really troubled teenager, and she ran away from home a lot. And it got to the point where her parents basically like couldn't handle her, and she ended up in sort of a children's home. And she used to leg it out of the children's home as well. And she went to this rock bar in The Hague, which is somewhere that I used to go when I lived there. And it was mostly just sort of rock music, but every now and again they'd have like open mics and little live shows and stuff. And she started singing at this bar, and some guy just discovered her and was like, right, we need to take you to your parents and get get some stuff signed. And obviously she didn't have any. Um, so it was a whole like convoluted process of actually like getting her a record deal. But
Yeah,
she got a record deal quite young, and then I think in her early 20s, um, she brought out, I can't remember if it was her first or second album. I think it was her second album that Nobody's Wife was on, but that was the first one that kind of got big, and
yeah,
it was huge in Holland.
yeah,
And it's a real like it's basically girl power for people who wear baggy jeans. That's how I always describe it. It's a
yeah.
real like uh it's a real like rock anthem.
You could throw it next to, you could throw it in the mix next to like Skunk and Nancy, couldn't you? It wouldn't sit out of place
Yeah, yeah.
in that kind of arena.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I thought International Women's Day last week as well be a good one to pick. But she's done loads of fantastic songs. She did another one called The Dark, which is really skunk and Nancy,
Yeah,
and the music video to it is inspired by Beetlejuice. So it's a really good watch.
yeah,
But she's done like a lot more poppy stuff as well, and she's done some really nice ballads. She's done a really nice sort of acoustic ballad about a first boyfriend. So she's got a real good range, but Nobody's Wife for me, like she just belts it out. And I've
yeah,
seen her do it live, and I don't think she ever sort of got any massive prominence outside of Holland, really. I know that she went to America to try and get a record deal, and it all kind of fell apart. But she's a national treasure in Holland, and she's still performing live now. Um, and yeah, Nobody's Wife's obviously the show closer that everyone loves, and it's one of those that I always recommend to people. Like if you're into rock music at all and you
yeah.
just want to hear somebody belt something out, Nobody's Wife's an absolute banger.
Solid choice, mate. Solid choice. Last track. I want you to tell me a song that you think many people may not know that you would like them to hear, please.
Yeah, so this is a song called Theremin by a guy called Ed Scissor, uh, or Ed Scissor Tongue, depending on how he feels on any given day. Um, he's a rapper from Cambridge in the UK, and I actually used to work with him. And at the
Okay.
time, I had no idea that he was into music at all. We worked at a video games company in Cambridge, and it was one of those companies where because it was a video games company and it's kind of cool for young people to work at a video games company, like they they felt like they were doing you a favor by giving you a job. And everyone had to be super positive and oh God, I love this place and I
Yeah.
want to be here for the rest of my life. And I was actually Ed's manager, and he used to do like performance reviews and stuff, and he'd be like, "Oh yeah, I can't wait to spend the rest of my career here." I had no idea that he was basically starting this music career off, and he had no idea that I didn't give a fuck about this place either, and I wanted to be an MMA journalist. We both sat there bullshitting each other for a couple of years, and it wasn't until after I left that a mutual friend of ours sent me a clip of a YouTube video of a song that he'd done with a guy called Dirty Dyke, who's another rapper from that same group's also got some really, really good tunes over the years as well. Um, and I just started listening to his music. I was like, holy shit, this is actually really, really good. He did an album about I think 10, 11 years ago now called Better Luck Next Life. And it's probably one of my favorite UK rap albums. It's got
Yeah.
some incredible songs on it. He's just an excellent wordsmith, and as someone who's like spent a lot of time writing and a lot of time talking, I just really appreciate wordsmithery. I'm not sure if that's even a word, but it is
Yeah.
now. I really enjoy like the way he sort of builds worlds in his songs. There was a song on that album called Max about a drug addict, and I'm not gonna lie, it's a really really bleak song, and it's not
Yeah.
kind of like a traditional format. There's no choruses or anything. It just verse after verse after verse, and by the end of the 5 minutes, like you feel really grimy, like you feel like you're inside Max's head, and just his ability to do that with words is incredible. And Theremin, I think for me, is probably my favorite song that he's done. Um, it's all kind of like about sort of I guess like a post-apocalyptic world that's breaking down, and just the imagery that he creates with it is fantastic. You know, it's not a song to stick on if you need cheering up or anything, but it's just a great one to listen to over and over. The music's great. I think it was produced by a guy called Lamplighter, who he's done a lot of work with. But for me, it's just the words. And there's a bar in it where he says something like, right hand swinging like a bag full of spanners, and I nicked it and used it in commentary, and got it on TV for him. So he was very pleased about that, and we actually got it. So we hadn't talked for years and years and years, and someone sent it to him while so a Cage Warriors fan was watching it and sent him the clip, and then we got back in touch and started talking, and I invited him to a show at the end of last year, and he turned up and gave me a copy of his book, and
Oh,
we had a good old
amazing.
catch up, which is yeah, just fantastic. But yeah, Theremin, Ed Scissor, check it out. It's a great song.
Oh, we make it easy for people to check it out, Brad, because we put together a Spotify playlist to accompany the pod with all of these amazing records that we've spoken about today. I want to talk about Brad Wharton a little bit now. I presume you're going to be, I mean, we're recording this on the 13th of March. We're, we're in the week leading up to a huge UFC event this Saturday in London, and there's a huge Cage Warriors event this Friday. You going to be doing your thing there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started our calendar last week in California. So it was the first time I've been out to commentate in America, which was pretty cool. I got
Amazing.
to live in a casino for a week, so considerably poorer than I was when I when I went over there. But them's the breaks. But yeah, big Cage Warriors event coming up this Friday to sort of coincide with UFC weekend, and then we're in the BT Sports Studio the week after that, and then April Manchester, Dublin. Rome in May. It's a busy year for Cage Warriors. I can't wait. Looking forward to calling some good fights.
Wonderful. And if people want to keep up to speed with everything you're doing, where's the best place to follow you, Brad?
So I'm on Twitter and occasionally Instagram at MMA Brad 48, and Cage Warriors is at Cage Warriors. Lots of good stuff dropping there. Promo videos. If you're into the old fisticuffs, there's definitely something for you.
Wonderful. Brad, it's been an absolute joy. Thanks so much for coming on today.
No, thank you for having me, man. Like I say, always enjoy chatting records in my spare time. Absolutely love it. Thank you.
Wonderful. I'm going to press stop. Don't go anywhere.